and that will be on international activities with Dr. Julie Moss. Dr. Moss?
About international activities within the foods program. As you can see from my credentials, I am a registered dietitian, and I understand many of you listening also have a nutrition background, so I thought I'd share a little bit with you about how my career evolved. I was a practicing dietitian for 6 years before coming to the FDA. I had an interest in food technology, so after my bachelor's and master's in nutrition, I did a PhD in food science so I could marry my two interests in nutrition and food science. I started my FDA career in produce safety, focusing on training in other countries about our requirements so as to export to the United States. And then I moved into the nutrition office here, working under Dr. Barbara Schneeman, as you heard yesterday. And I worked on trans fat labeling and health claims. And currently, I am now with the international activities staff that involves both food safety and nutrition in the international arena. So my career path is not typical for a dietitian, but I have to say it certainly has been interesting. For the agenda today for my talk, I'm going to talk about three main areas. One, a little bit about imported foods, just to give you a sense of why we're interested in this. Secondly, some of the main buckets of activities that we do in international activities for the foods program, and then also share with you a little bit about FDA's foreign posts that are quite new for us. And then lastly, about the Food Safety Modernization Act and some of the main provisions, just to give you some highlighted information. I'll start off with a question first and ask all of you listening, do you eat imported food? And I'll come back to this answer after the next couple of slides. Today's food safety system must meet the demands of a food supply system vastly different from 100 years ago or even 10 years ago. Our food supply is more technologically advanced and complex and is also the result of consumer demand. Just think of the choices you enjoy today in the produce aisle alone. Personally, for myself, I can remember growing up and only being able to eat strawberries in May or June of every year, but now we see strawberries every day at the grocery store and can buy them as needed. This is an example of the quantity of ingredients in a single food item that many Americans consume. And this is simply to convey the complicated supply chain and to recognize that many of these ingredients are imported. I do want to thank the National Center for Food Protection and Defense for this interesting slide, because it really does convey a nice message of the quantity of ingredients that go into one single food product. Here's another example of the foreign supply chain for food, for a typical food item that you and I eat on a regular basis. And I just want you to take a moment to view the various boxes that are surrounding the salad. And you'll see various countries or regions of the world identified where many of these food products come from that you and I eat on a regular basis. And lastly, this is yet another slide to convey the degree of food imports that have arisen over the last decade. This is not to say that imports are less safe at all. Domestic and imported food are required to have the same level of assurances for food safety. And this is looking at a graph that depicts import lines. And import lines is merely a shipping entry, which a shipping entry may entail 1 case of a food product or could be 200 cases of a food product. But this is a really good indication of the volume of imports that have risen over the last decade. Globalization has fundamentally changed the environment for regulating food and has created more unique regulatory challenges for FDA. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, there's more foreign food facilities supplying the U.S. Second, we have increasing volume of imported food products. And again, this goes to my previous point about supply meeting demand. We have more outsourcing of food manufacturing. We also have a greater complexity in food supply chains, and that is to greater technologies, which has to do with greater technologies around transportation, refrigeration, packaging, and so forth. And lastly, imports of food products coming from countries with less well-developed regulatory systems. So I want to go back to answering the question that I posed a few slides earlier. Do you eat imported food? There is no right or wrong answer, but I'd like to venture to guess that you all have eaten imported food quite recently. And a simple point of reference is that every banana you eat is imported. This slide is just depicting some of the major buckets of work that my specific group works on with regards to international activities for the Foods program. And I'll just go through these quickly with you. Codex Alimentarius is the international standard setting body, which has a dual mandate of increasing trade and increasing public health. FDA is very active in this international work. Another item is the World Trade Organization and other trade-related agreements and obligations that the U.S. has signed into. Specific to the World Trade Organization, the United States is one of over 150 nations that have signed onto this agreement, and there are certain aspects and requirements that we are obligated to meet. And so it's very important that we follow our obligations with these various trade agreements. For technical assistance and capacity building, it behooves us to help build other countries' food safety systems since they export food to the United States that you and I consume every day. And this is the area where I am primarily focused on in the international activities, just to let you know. Other buckets of work include support or for foreign inspections and the International Visitors Program. And you'll see some examples of links to videos that we've done to educate visitors about the FDA Foods program, and those are just a few examples. Let me ask you another question. Where are FDA foreign offices located? And I've listed multiple countries here. I've also given you the option to respond with other countries not identified, some of the above, or even all of the above. And I'll go back to answering this question in just a moment. Let me just go through here and just give you the intent or the objective and goals of FDA's international offices. These were actually started just recently, back in 2008. And the general purpose is to engage more proactively with our trading partners and to build relationships with these countries that export product to the United States. And the foreign offices are not only focused on food, but they're also focused on the other mission areas of FDA, such as drugs, biologics, tobacco products, and so forth. But I'm just going to go through some of the bullets here on the slide just to give you a general sense of what the foreign offices do for us. They allow us to increase our knowledge about the food products manufactured in these particular countries. They allow us to respond to inquiries from these other food safety regulators similar to FDA so that we can build our relationships and help build capacity within their food safety system to assure product safety. We also provide information about FDA's regulations, standards, and expectations so that industry from those countries can export product into the United States appropriately. We also engage with sister agencies that have posts abroad as well to better coordinate U.S. approaches and achieve synergy with all of our resources. And other agencies that have posts abroad would be USAID, USDA, CDC as well. And lastly, our foreign posts are also there to help us with foreign inspections as well, since there is the mandate in our new Food Safety Modernization Act, which I'll get to in a few slides, to increase our foreign inspections. So this is the answer to my previous question. If you answered all of the above, then you are correct. So let me go through this map from left to right just to give you a sense of where the foreign offices are located. You'll see in the United States, that's where headquarters is located in the Washington, D.C. metro area, but then FDA's Inspectorate Force is located in other cities around the United States. The Latin America office is headquartered out of San Jose, Costa Rica, with satellite offices in Mexico City, Mexico, and Santiago, Chile. Moving to the middle of the map, we have a Europe office, which is actually headquartered in Washington, D.C., but we have satellite offices in London, England, and Parma, Italy. We also have a Middle East and North Africa office, which is housed in Amman, Jordan. And our most recent office is in Pretoria, South Africa. Moving over to India, our India office locations are in New Delhi and Mumbai. And then our China office is headquartered out of Beijing, but we also have other offices in Shanghai and Guangzhou. And lastly, we do have an Asia Pacific office, which doesn't have a foreign location, but is housed in out of the headquarters. All right, let me go back into the last section that I wanted to share with you today, and this is the Food Safety Modernization Act. And the next few slides will give you some highlights with regards to this new legislation. And just to let you know, we refer to this as FISMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act. The 4 pillars within FSMA are prevention, responsibility, and accountability through inspection, compliance, and quick response to outbreaks, import safety, and enhanced partnerships. These 4 components combine to provide the tenets for a safer and better food supply chain. The 4 sections of FSMA lay out these main themes within the legislation itself. Title I shifts the food safety system to more prevention-based focus, which essentially means that we want to prevent problems from occurring in the first place. And this includes requirements for hazard analysis and preventative controls, produce safety standards, and protection against intentional adulteration. Title II improves the compliance and response tools already available to FDA, including laboratory accreditation, enhanced product tracing, and more robust recall and detention authority to keep adulterated food off the market. Title III focuses on imports, introducing programs such as foreign supplier verification, import certification, and third-party accreditation. And lastly, Title IV is a miscellaneous section which reaffirms the existing jurisdiction of U.S. food safety agencies and also requires FDA to implement FSMA in accordance with our World Trade Organization obligations. Prevention is key. Food and feed producers will need to identify where hazards can occur, establish control points, monitor how the systems work, fix problems when they occur, and keep records of what they have done. And this is not new for us. We have done this with juice and seafood and low-acid canned foods already, but now it applies across the food industry, and FDA has the tools to hold companies accountable. An example is the requirement for FDA to establish science-based standards for the safe growing, harvesting, and packing of produce. The FDA will also have the authority to issue regulations to prevent intentional adulteration or contamination of food, including the establishment of science-based mitigation strategies to prepare and protect the food supply chain at specific vulnerable points. And lastly, transportation of food is also addressed in the legislation. The law will only be effective if producers and processors comply with it. FDA will ensure compliance through inspections and respond effectively to problems. The law calls for more frequent risk-based inspections. Going forward, all high-risk domestic facilities must be inspected within 5 years of enactment and no less than every 3 years thereafter. Within 1 year of enactment, the law directs FDA to inspect at least 600 foreign facilities and doubles those inspections every year for the next 5 years. With preventative controls in place, we can now consider new ways to inspect. The law also provides several other tools for the agency. We have the authority to issue a mandatory recall when a company fails to voluntarily recall unsafe food after being asked to by the FDA. We will have access to records, including industry food safety plans, and the records firms will be required to keep documenting implementation of their plans. More flexible standard for administratively detaining products that are potentially in violation of the law. Authority to suspend registration of a facility if FDA determines that the food poses a reasonable probability of serious adverse health consequences or death. In addition, FDA will continue working with industry and other experts to examine food tracing systems to enhance our ability to rapidly track and trace domestic and imported foods. FDA is directed to establish pilot projects to explore and evaluate methods to rapidly and effectively identify recipients of food to prevent or control a foodborne illness outbreak. And my last point on this slide is FSMA requires certain food testing to be carried out by accredited laboratories and directs FDA to establish a program for laboratory accreditation to ensure that U.S. food testing laboratories meet high quality standards. The FDA will now have unprecedented authority to ensure that imported products meet U.S. standards and are safe for U.S. consumers. For the first time, importers have the explicit responsibility to verify that their foreign suppliers have adequate preventative controls in place to ensure that the food they produce is safe. The law requires establishment of a program through which qualified third parties can certify that foreign food facilities comply with U.S. food safety standards. FDA has the authority to require that high-risk imported foods be accompanied by a credible third-party certification or other assurance of compliance as a condition of entry into the United States. FDA must establish a voluntary program for importers that provides for expedited review and entry of foods from participating exporters. And lastly on this slide, FDA can refuse entry into the United States of food from foreign facilities if FDA is denied access by the facility or the country in which the facility is located. Implementation of FSMA and the various directives is being carried out by 6 teams, with various work groups within these teams. The 6 teams are, and this is looking across the top of the slide, preventive standards, inspection and compliance, imports, federal-state integration, fees, and reports and studies. And just to let you know, I lead the International Capacity Building Work Group under the imports team, which is, I think, the 5th box down. I know Dr. Schneeman shared the rulemaking process with you earlier, so I won't dwell too much on this slide, other than to say that FSMA is following the same process, and we encourage you to share your comments with us. These are snapshots of the different elements of the FSMA homepage. Some examples include what's new, blogs, Consumer Corner that features FSMA news for the general public, frequently asked questions, and status of implementation of FSMA. Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate your listening, and if you'd like to learn more about FSMA or our international activities, please visit our website at www.fda.gov.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, and we will now open it for questions. There are some questions on the screen. I just want to make sure I get to the very beginning of the questions. I've seen several questions, so please send in your questions. We have just a few minutes for questions. One question deals with the FDA office in Parma, Italy. Do you have any information on the FDA contact there?
Sure, I can share that with you. My email is located, I believe, on the first slide of my presentation. Feel free to send an email to me. There's also information on FDA's website that has, oh, my email is not there. But I would suggest looking on the FDA website. There are specifics about the various foreign offices, and there are also some links or websites and emails on the website for you to make some connections. I'm also happy to do it myself.
Okay, thank you. And the next question is, what is considered high risk in regards to inspection?
High risk is a terminology that the agency is grappling with and trying to find a set definition. But when we generally think of high risk with regards to imports, and in particular foreign inspections, because that's just is my arena, we look at the volume of imports coming in, we look at the history of problems with imports coming in from either a region or a specific country. So we look at the data based on science and make some scientific decisions with regards to risk-based decision making to base foreign inspection locations.
And there's a question about does FSMA oversee imported meat, or is that USDA? And I can answer that one. Remember, Dr. Schneeman asked that question yesterday. Meats fall under the jurisdiction of USDA, the Food Safety and Inspection Service. So we'll go on to the next question. How does FDA determine which foreign facilities to inspect?
Well, I'm not an expert in that area, but again, it's back to the risk-based process that the agency is following, and it's based on the volume of imports, history of problems, where we're getting the most products from, and then making some decisions with regards to how to move forward.
And there's another one that's related to high risk in the wake of melamine. How is FDA defining high risk? We have another team working on melamine. Dr. Moss, would you like to address it? Would you like to move on? We'll move on because there's another team working on that. And you're going to hear later from Paul South about chemical contaminants in food. So that's going to be in a later presentation. So the next one, and I believe this will be our last one. You mentioned 600 foreign facilities must be inspected a year. Just in China alone, there are more than that. So do you do it per country or risk-based or new company? Do you have a volunteer programs? I'm interested. Whoever this is, person in California?
Sure. Again, it's back to the risk-based process that we utilize. We don't often have volunteers being volunteered to be inspected by FDA, so that's not a typical part of the process. And we don't go by new company in a country or whatnot. It's really based on who sends product to the U.S., what's the history, what's the volume, and so forth.
All right. So we're going to remain on time, and we're going to end this session and move to our next session,